philosophy and, and has gained more than 2 decades of teaching and research experience. Just to let everyone know, this meeting is being recorded, as you just heard the notification on Zoom just now. Now, Prof. Bala believes that an individual can lead a happy and effective life by realizing inner strength and potentially through self-reflection and self-care. He aims to help people in this realization through the practice of yoga and philosophy. He's been offering workshops and sessions on mindfulness, meditation, and leadership as a part of his philosophical practice. So that's Prof. Bala. He will be giving you a presentation for 8 to 10 minutes. Also on the panel, there's a panel of 4. That's one. We have Ms. Zante Thomas. She is the Guild representative for the Faculty of Humanities and Education, my faculty. She's a second-year integrated marketing communication major. That's Carmack. I used to attend Carmack as well. And she's also an intern at Grace Kennedy Foundation. Now, Zante is the founder and executive director of Sign Clubs of Jamaica and is the Grace Kennedy Jamaica Scholar for 2022. Good stuff right there. Congrats, Zante. Now, Mr. Perry Cummings Jr., I should say, is a final year political science student who is currently serving as the Faculty of Social Sciences Guild representative, and he is also Guild president-elect, where he intends to continue his journey of advocacy and student representation. Mr. Perry is also a recording artist, social media influencer, and youth advocate. Big things that, by the way. Congratulations, Mr. Perry. That's impressive. We also have with us Mr. Richard Hines. Now, Richard Hines is a first-year philosophy major at the University of the West Indies Mona campus, where he's acting president of the UWI Philosophy Society. Mr. Hines is also a religious brother. He describes himself as a person who is passionate about exploring unconventional perspectives, someone who thrives on questioning traditional notions and who seeks alternative avenues of inquiry. Richard finds solace in walks and is excited by enriching conversations that broaden his understanding. He is deeply fascinated by the intricate ways in which diverse experiences shape individuals' lives, believing that this understanding is fundamental to our cherished values and beliefs. And he is who we will start with. We'll be getting brief 2-minute introductory comments from our 3 panelists, Richard, Perry, and Zante, before we go to Prof. Bala, who will speak for 8 to 10 minutes on the topic. So firstly, let me start by asking Richard Hines. Richard, as you give your opening remarks right now, I just wanted to start by telling us whether you've ever voted or not, and why not, and then you can give your opening remarks.
Good afternoon, everyone. I have actually never voted, Giovanni. I have never voted. I'm one of those persons who believe that my one vote will not change what the masses already represent or what the masses already want. I do believe democracy is a great form of government. It's a government by the people, for the people, in its ideal state. But also, I believe, especially in the Jamaican context, everything has become so monopolized, and so I believe it doesn't leave much room for the voice of the actual people to be heard. Thank you.
And in terms of your own opening remarks, that's what we got from Richard. Of course, the topic, just a reminder for those of you just joining in on our Zoom, why should citizens vote in Jamaica? We will go next to Ms. Zante Thomas for her opening remarks, but I'll just ask her to comment as well whether she has ever voted or not before then going into her opening remarks. Thanks so much, Richard. Oh, you weren't hearing me just now. I'm so sorry. I saw Prof. Bala in the...
Okay.
So
No, she is on mute. She is speaking, but she is on mute. That's what I want.
Okay, so just to
Okay, you're hearing
notify
me
if
now,
you're
right?
speaking, Zante, you're on mute.
Okay, you're hearing me now, right?
Yes, we are.
Okay, all right. Good evening, everyone. I've never voted in neither the general elections nor the local government election. And this stems mainly from my lack of trust in the political parties, especially given the fact that almost every day in the news we see stories of corruption from both political parties, and this over time not only erodes the trust in for the government and the opposition, for myself, but also the other young persons I speak with on a day-to-day basis.
So that's 2 from 2, 2 young people so far who have not voted in Jamaica. I did this deliberately because I'm not at all surprised. And that's the reason why we have young people on our panel, because it's very important to hear their views and their perspectives as to why they have not voted. I'm pretty certain Jeanette Calder of the Jamaica Accountability Meter portal, who is also on our Zoom platform here, will have some interesting thoughts and questions on that when we get to that point. But before we move on, we were waiting a little bit earlier on our guild president-elect. That is Mr. Perry Cummings. I do hope he's on right now. If you are on, Mr. Cummings, could you just give us your opening take on the topic, why should citizens vote in Jamaica, by starting by telling us whether you voted or not in Jamaica, and then give your opening remarks.
Thank you so very much. I am here. I had a few things to attend to before hopping on. As you know, being guild president-elect is a very monumental task, especially as I would approach this transitioning period. But as a matter of voting, I have not voted in a general or local elections, but I've participated in democratic processes. And for that, I appreciate the opportunity to have a voice or a say in as to who takes the lead. And it's something that I will be changing though. Don't worry, I plan to vote the upcoming elections. I definitely have a plan to vote in the general election. However, yes, I've never voted before. I was brought up, a matter of socialization, and I'm sure that will be coming out when you're socialized to focus on other things and not necessarily politics. It takes a lot out of you to venture into something that you were never exposed to. But voting is indeed important, and I wouldn't encourage anybody to vote. Thank you.
So, Mr. Perry there sounding like the consummate politician already. Guild president-elect in his seat saying, I've never voted, but I've participated in the democratic process. Yes, of course. You voted for yourself in all the elections so far at the University of the West Indies as expected. But it sets us up nicely now to go to Professor Balaganapathy Devarakonda from India, who is our guest speaker today, speaking on the topic, why should citizens vote in Jamaica? We've heard from 3 young people, all of whom have never voted in Jamaica. Prof. Bala will now give his verdict on all of this, plus a philosophical perspective, I take it. And after that, we will invite everyone on the Zoom, all 28 of us, to ask your questions. You can send in your questions from now and send in your questions as Prof is speaking. I will put the questions to them. Just type your questions and we'll take all of them. But Prof, it is over to you, the main man for the after.
Yeah, thank you so much, Giovanni, Dennis, for this interesting way of beginning the whole conversation, especially inviting the youngsters to speak first and express their opinions first, so that sets the platform for us to go further. Yeah, it's these 3 interesting responses. I would try to respond to them as well in the course of what I'm going to say now. But let me begin this way by thanking Miss Stephenson for this wonderful idea, and also Miss Kim Connell, my colleague from the department. And I think these 2 are the ones who have brought out with this idea of a philosopher's point of view. And I really congratulate their innovative way of trying to bring philosophy close to the society. and my co-panelists, Jayante and Mr. Perry and Mr. Richard Hines. It's so wonderful to hear their points of view. And I also see among our audience colleagues from the department and the dean of the school, Professor Sylvia and Dr. Nilsson White, Dr. Omosulu from philosophy section, and many other colleagues from other departments and students from the departments, different departments as well, along with other friends of Jamaica that I see many of them around us. Good afternoon to all of you friends. Yeah, how do I begin? No, I was thinking, in order to begin, what we have to build the context. So what is the context that makes us think about this voting? Why should voting be important in this present context? Because obviously we see elections coming up in many countries, not just in Jamaica, even in India, elections are going on, and US and many other countries, elections are on. So that sets the context for talking about voting. But there is also a larger context which is important for us, which is democracy. Okay, so people often talk about. See, I may intentionally try to make some provocative remarks. Please excuse me for that. But often people say that the crisis of democracy is the leaders. I would say crisis of democracy is because of the voters, not because of the leaders. Right? That's my opening kind of a statement. When it comes to democracy, it is the most popular form of democracy that we see around us, and voting and voters turnout is coming down drastically in many of the countries all around the world. And this is a very serious, alarming kind of an issue, which the governments and also the political parties which are involved in the processes of democracy have to seriously respond to. And this drastic coming down of voters' turnout questions the very spirit of democracy. And we see a kind of discontentment and disenchantment among the voters with regard to the democratic processes, which is causing this. We need to seriously address it. So how do we address it? No? By looking at the very core of democracy itself. Democracy is, as I already said, is considered to be the best form of government now all around the world. You look at globally, people say democracy is the best form of government because it encourages people's participation. And it's not just they celebrate democracy, they also say that other forms of government, like authoritarian governments, etc., dictatorial forms of governments are very bad. This is what is being presented to us. Though at some places you will find dictatorial or authoritarian forms of governments doing really well, right? So if we consider democracy to be the best form of government, why is it considered to be best form of government? Only for the reason that there is a participation. So participatory democracy, people participate in democracy. That is how democracy is considered to be best form of government, where there is a possibility of people coming together and making choices with regard to the political governance. So if democracy, the whole edifice of democracy is rooted in the very fact of participation of the people, what is the kind of participation that we can look at? The basic foundational participation of the citizens is definitely voting, okay? Whether you would be able to participate in the making of the constitution is doubtful, but you have every right to be a part of the elections by voting. So that is how the whole edifice of democracy stands on this small leg that you see to be the voting, okay? If voting is so important, then look at the world, okay? There is a paradoxical situation that you see where democracies are being celebrated, and at the other end, ground reality, people are not voting. Okay, so if you're celebrating want to be the best form of government, and you see that the people's participation is coming down. That's the modern contemporary crisis or contemporary paradox of democracy that we see, which is very important for us to address. So that is the context that helps us to go further. So why should I vote? This is the question that we come across most of the times. Even our youngsters have expressed their own disenchantment with regard to the processes of democracy, saying that my one vote doesn't matter. That's the kind of response from one of our friends. Heinz has said, and the other one said, I don't have faith or trust in the political processes. So why should I vote is a serious question that comes forward, and especially from the younger generations, strongly when they try to respond to this democratic processes. So there are, I tried to talk to some of the students and also senior members of the society, trying to list out various reasons that come up as why should I vote? Why should I vote? Kind of a question. See, one reason could be a kind of lethargy. I don't want to go and vote. One is I don't care. This is a serious problem for me. I don't care what happens. Okay. Then I also find answers like whom to vote when options are bad, right? And all parties, some of them have said all parties. I'm not just talking about Jamaica. I'm talking about the world in general. All parties gang up against the people. This is the kind of view that some of our people have with regard to voting. And also, it doesn't matter because I'm old. Whether I vote or not, it doesn't matter. So these are the kind of responses that I have got from various people when they were trying to, when I asked them and I probed them into why, whether they are voting and why they are not voting. Now, I have three reasons because of which I believe we should vote. One is political, the second one is legal, third one is ethical. Okay, this is what I'm going to present in 5 minutes. Okay, the political, let me talk about the political reasons why we should vote. It is your right. If you don't have it, you will fight for it, right? See, for example, imagine, look at the history. People did not have voting rights and they really fought for it. Your forefathers, our forefathers have fought for the right to vote, and we are not performing we are not exercising our right, which is a strange kind of thing. And you fight, if you don't have it, you will definitely fight for this right to vote. And if you get it, you don't exercise it. That is a very serious kind of a problem. This is where I want you to reflect on this particular point. It's not that all rights, you can possess a right and you still don't exercise it. This is okay with some of the rights. Okay, say for example, you have right to property and right to speech, and you decide not to exercise them. That is fine. But you have right to food and right to health. You cannot say that, no, I don't want to exercise these rights. Similar kind of right, fundamental right is right to vote, because that's the life that gives very life to the democratic processes. That is how you cannot say that I want the right, but I don't want to exercise the right, right? So that's a serious paradoxical kind of thing that shows the waters inner crisis coming up in a different form. So this is where I believe it is important that individuals should recognize that once you have the right, you have to perform it. You have to exercise it. Okay. Abstinence causes, in fact, I would consider politically, your abstinence from voting causes violence, violation of the rights of yours and rights of others as well. This is a very serious issue that I'm talking about. Your abstinence from voting causes violation of your own right, and it also causes violation of your responsibility to others, violation of the rights of others. So in this particular context, I believe voters must vote. And let me go to the next one, legal one. Why should one vote? Yeah, this is an interesting question. Don't you feel very bad if your government comes into power with less than 20% of the votes polled in total, whatever is available? Is it not don't you think it is a disgrace to the voter himself or herself? See, don't think that this is a disgrace to the government. I would never say that. I would always say that it is a disgrace to the citizen. It is disgrace to the voters who have the capacity of it. So that is where, historically, as I said earlier, people have fought for the rights. And if you don't exercise it, if you don't participate, then you lose the right to complain as well. Okay, look at any context, organizational context. Only if you exercise only if you participate in the processes, you will have the right to complain as well. We seem to be complaining all the time as voters without participating in it, which is a clear paradoxical kind of one once again for me. So that's where it is important for the individuals to vote. And as I said, you make others' votes effective or ineffective. Your abstinence from the vote makes others' vote more effective and sometimes less effective. So that is how, if you say my one vote is not going to cause anything, I would say no, please think about it, because your one vote is going to strengthen similar kind of votes, defeat other kinds of votes. So you have to understand the importance of the number, because democracy is all about numbers, unfortunately now. So that is how the number always counts. Let me come to this ethical concern that we have. See, for instance, some injustice happened. What do you choose to do? Do you choose to be silent, remain silent, or do you choose to respond to it? Because if you choose to be silent, which means there is no difference between you and a stone on the road. Okay, if some injustice happens, if you are responding, that is the best form. No, you have to respond. Similarly, you bring it to the context of voting. When elections are happening, you cannot be a silent witness, because you are supposed to be a part of the processes that are happening, because that is how you determine what is justice and injustice indirectly. So that's what prepares the ground. And also, when we talk about voting, it is a civic duty, we call it, right? Why is it civic duty? Because your responsibility, it is your duty, because it is your responsibility towards first your own self. Because if you keep complaining, saying that I don't have, my roads are not good, this is not happening, that is not happening in the country, then the point is you are not doing your responsibility towards yourself, and you still go on complaining. That is where ethically it is important to understand it to be a duty, because it is the one which determines your responsibility to yourself and your responsibility to other citizens as well. Because as I said, your one vote can strengthen a particular kind of one, can defeat other kind of ones. So that is how, if you deprive yourself, your duty towards.
No, I'm just on this.
Just 2
asking
more
the
minutes, I'm going to
person
stop.
who's on to mute their mic. I think someone is speaking and their mic was not muted. Sorry, Prof, continue.
No problem. I'll just take 1 or 2 minutes. I'm going to close it. Yeah, that is how. One is responsibility to yourself. Number 2 is responsibility to the other citizens of the country. Okay, so the first one you can say, oh, I don't care. But second one is more important. Okay, the third responsibility is towards the country itself. Because we all say, I love Jamaica, right? If you say, I love Jamaica, then you cannot say, I don't vote. I don't want to vote. If you love Jamaica, you have to vote, right? You have to participate in the processes of democracy. That is how some rights or duties as well at the same time. And voting is such kind of a right, which is a duty at the same time. So these are the important points that I believe which are important to take note of. And yeah, this will lead to another interesting question that comes up in the recent past in the democracies, where voters sell their votes. Right? That opens another Pandora's box where it's like voter himself becomes more unethical in the sense of selling their votes. So let me not get into that, but I'm stressing this point that it is the duty of it is the right, and it is the duty, and it is also the privilege that is enrolled with the citizen, and that is how this has to be exercised. You cannot say that I have the right, but I don't want to exercise with regard to such kind of fundamental rights, which is at the core of the democratic processes. Yeah, I rest my case there.
Okay, well, that is just about enough to start us off on the discussion. Please remember, you can type your questions in the chat, and those questions will be passed on to me. They'll be vetted and passed on. The reason for them to be vetted is not that we're saying some questions are better than some, but if the essence of the questions are the same, I think the organizers at the back end will just, sift through and send the ones that are different enough. So just a quick recap, we have Richard, who has never voted, and he believes that his one vote does not count. That was the view from our first student, Richard. And then we have Zante, never voted. She distrusts the system, essentially, and distrusts both parties. Perry has never voted. However, he plans to vote. I think he had to say that because he's a politician himself, a young politician himself. And Prof. Bala, I have a whole list of things here that you have said, but just to summarize briefly, voter apathy is essentially voter apathy is global. There are three reasons why you believe that people should vote: the political, the legal, and the ethical reasons. You compare the right to vote as similar to the right to food and the right to health. And for you, it's paradoxical not to vote. You cannot not exercise that right. Abstinence, you say, causes violation of rights for you and violation of rights of others. From the legal perspective, you say that only if you participate, you have the right to complain. I disagree with that view. The ethical perspective, you say that it's a civic duty. And you end by reminding that it's a responsibility to self and country to vote, especially this part about country that speaks to me. And we're grounding this discussion in philosophical constructs, the principle of utilitarianism there, which is grounded in the idea of the greater good. I put it to you, though, Professor, that people who don't vote are in fact sharing their opinion. They're sharing their opinion in the sense that I am so disillusioned by both of what you are doing, which again is the majority of citizens. They're disillusioned with the process how it is happening. And by not voting, we're saying to the both of you, fix things up and improve yourself, and then you will get more of us to participate. How do you respond to people who give that view? And I have a follow-up question that is very similar as well. But the people who don't vote are actually sharing their view. And in a sense, again, to ground this in philosophy from a pragmatic perspective.
Yeah, thank you, Giovanni, for this important question. In fact, if you look at the world scenario, you would find this concept called NOTA, N-O-T-A, okay, which was introduced in some of the countries where NOTA means none of the above. Okay, when the voter votes, along with the people who are listed who have been contesting, there should also be a column where it should be mentioned, NOTA should be mentioned. So if more number of votes go to NOTA, then these people, the election should be conducted again. Okay, so this is the kind of one of the mechanisms that is available elsewhere. But otherwise, I do understand the point that often we get into a kind of disenchantment with regard to elections and democratic processes and say that, oh, all of them, I don't have a good choice. Let me put it in a better way. Okay, that is how they say, I don't want to vote because I don't have a good choice. So now this is where I gave the example of some injustice happens. Do you want to keep quiet if the injustice happens to you, or do you want to respond to it? Is it good to be acting, or is it good to be staying with inaction? Obviously, only if you participate, then you can change something. So you are accepting the defeat even before you can, even before you perform your action. So such kind of an attitude on the part of the voter is not good, according to me. And it is also that once you start exercising your vote, imagine when the percentage of votes increases, percentage of votes polled increases, then it automatically makes political parties more and more responsible because they would understand the volatility of their own position. If you don't vote, then what is it that is happening? You are giving them more chance of, staying as what they are. So don't you look for a change, or do you think that it is okay? Let me be with whatever that I have now, or let it get deteriorated. I don't care. Right? So this is where I believe it is important for the voters to think that I should vote. And that is how I make some change. I bring some change.
Prof. Bala, we have this other question coming in from Juliet Jackson. I would invite the Guild president-elect to respond as well, but I'd want you to respond first. If the political party that you support has failed to adhere to the mandates of the party, or it is antagonistic towards constructive criticisms, in other words, you can't say nothing bad about the party or because if you're anti the party if you do. What is the point in voting?
It is like, yeah, since I'm not going to win in the, only one person wins the gold medal in the Olympics, I don't want to participate. Do you think this would go well with Jamaicans? I don't think so. Jamaicans have a higher sportsmanship, so they prefer to go and contest, right? So in that particular sense, only because only one person is going to win, it is not that you would stop acting at all. So I don't see that to be a viable option for the human being. Even if you look at your own life, do you think that, since only somebody is going to get it, only one is going to get it, I don't want to compete at all? Do you think that, do you accept such kind of logic in your life? If you don't accept such kind of logic in your life, I would say don't please extend it to the democratic processes as well.
I want to get a perspective on this, on the thoughts from our Guild president-elect, Mr. Perry. Your thoughts on the idea of staying away and not voting if you are dissatisfied with the party or the candidate that you support and they're being averse to constructive criticism.
All right, so good evening again. Thanks for the question. I think most persons vote for one or two things. Most persons vote based on the fundamental principles and ideologies of a political party. So whether or not that administration does well, they would remember what the party stands for and will vote accordingly. Another set of persons will vote based on the performance of the administration and whether or not they grew up in a quote-unquote orange area or a green area. Based on performance, they will vote accordingly. However, I would advise persons to vote not just because of the family that they grew up in or based on their area, but look at the work that that particular government has executed and you vote according to the work. Because if we get into the mentality of voting because I know the person or my grandmother did support that party or my grandfather, then democracy at its core becomes corrupted and you no longer have a freedom to vote based on your own observation and analysis of performance. You now vote based on influence around you. So the philosophy of the whole voting, it becomes very technical. And there was even, I'm about to head into another discourse. And what I heard is that some persons who don't vote is still communicating something to us. Because if we force persons to vote, is that really democracy? If we make it mandatory for persons to vote, is that a true democracy? The question is going to be asked. I think persons should still have the freedom to choose whether or not, because for those who don't vote, it still communicates something. It's either they don't believe in neither parties or they are waiting for a change in one or the two. So that's just my 2 cents on it.
Interesting perspective. Thank you so much for that, Perry. Again, I want to put it to the both of you that people who are not voting sorry, people who are voting aren't necessarily voting because of ideology, one, or two, performance. Speaking from a journalistic perspective and what we cover when we interview persons on election days, in the recent local government election, my colleague Kirk Wright spoke to a voter in Papine and the clip went viral. She said she's voting because the person can buy her chicken right now and she's putting on a fish fry, and that person she's directly benefiting right now from this candidate. Because the truth is, and which is a big criticism of our democracy, how democracy is practiced in Jamaica. Once you vote, you don't really have much say or much influence or sway until another round of election, which is 5 years after. And how much of a democracy is that? And I wanted to get a perspective from Zante on that. What are your thoughts on our system of democracy, wherein it's pretty much you only have a say every 5 years or every election cycle? There is no power of recall right now, and that for many people is a problem. And I want to hear what Zante and Richard have to say on that before I ask a question, Jeanette to respond to that as well. Jeanette believes that people by not voting also have a say, but in terms of people who are saying, hey, we can't do nothing about it, it doesn't make no sense. For you, Zante, your thoughts on that?
Okay. So I wanted to address what you mentioned at first because I was thinking about it a lot. The fact that based on history, there are certain things such as political tribalism which heavily affects the voting landscape in Jamaica. So the fact that political tribalism and clientelism significantly outweighs the educated voice in Jamaica, I feel like that's one of the reasons why a lot of young persons don't want to vote, because they think it doesn't make any sense, because majority of Jamaicans, some of who are uneducated, vote for, the same thing that went viral, parties offering them something for a short-term period, or political loyalty based on what their family grew up supporting and stuff. And the other thing you mentioned about us only being able to
Sir, what are your
vote
thoughts
every
on
5
that? What are your thoughts on that? That you just
on
explained.
about political tribalism and clientelism?
Yeah, voting based on what you can get and what you can benefit. Because to me, that's a philosophy. And again, of course, we're grounding all of this in philosophical constructs. That's a pragmatic philosophy. People who live on the ground are saying, hey, me nah see her here for me for the next 5 years. What you can do for me right now, today, we can benefit me. That's pragmatic. Again, that's somebody's lived reality. They know existentialism again, And so, and I wanted to get your thoughts on that approach. I mean, explain, but what are your thoughts on it?
I personally think that that's a problem, because the whole reason why we elect our leaders is to consistently provide the country with benefits over the 5 years, instead of just short-term periods, just for the exchange of votes. So I really do believe that politicians should consistently work over the 5 years so that they can earn or vote again through that way, instead of those short-term exchanges. But then again, that's what a lot of educated people think. Persons who aren't as educated, that's their reality, and that's what they grew up on. So I don't know if that will ever change. I really don't know.
It's interesting to hear your perspective as a young person. You explained a lot there of what we'd call idealism. A perspective from you before we move on, though, Richard?
Yes. I would much rather spoil a ballot. So I took what Professor Bala said earlier about the responsibility to self and the responsibility to my fellow citizens and the responsibility to Jamaica, because I love Jamaica. But I'd much rather to spoil a ballot than to vote PMP or JLP just because my family or just because my area. And that's what is heavily practiced in Jamaica. Even if you want to go against the grain, and that's what I said earlier, even if a few of us, as Zante said, even if a few of the educated ones decided to vote, it might not be, even if we take it as a personal responsibility, it might not be as much because Jamaica has long been practicing politics based on tribalistic views.
Richard, I have a question for you from Gillian Rowlands. Based on what you're saying in terms of you much rather spoil a ballot than voting based on for either party based on where you're from. Gillian is asking, this is Gillian Rowlands, do you think you have the right to be part of a democracy without participating in it? What would you do if your right to vote was taken from you?
Well, if
From
my
who?
right to vote
Yeah.
was taken from me, I would no longer be in a democratic state because you can't take that away. It would no longer be democratic. But if I have a right to participate, of course, I do believe any participation is participation. And that's why I'm saying I took what Professor Bala said earlier. I'm taking it as a personal responsibility. I'm thinking about it ethically. Okay, but then my participation will be some sort of silent participation. I will go and I won't choose the better of the two evils. I'll just choose my own evil, if I'm saying it that way. I will make my voice be heard, spoiler, but I won't choose the options that you're giving to me because those aren't feasible.
Prof. Bala, we're hearing the young people speak and they're making their voices heard. I should say to our panelists and also all of you joining on that we only have about a little over 10 minutes to go, and we do want to take in all of your questions. We do want everyone as many people to participate as we can. Prof. Bala, you've heard the young people respond to some of what has been said in terms of what you are saying and the essence of Gillian's question as well. Your thoughts on what you're hearing?
Yeah, let me quickly respond to at least three things that I have identified. One is
and I should say quickly, Prof, before you start, if you can keep the responses a minute or less, because I want to get in. We have several questions piling up and I want to get as much as we can.
Yeah, I'll just take 1 minute to respond. Let me quickly do that. One of the interesting things that came with Perry's response is forcing to vote is not democratic. Okay, so I think that that's a very interesting point that he has mentioned, because that shows the kind of attitude that people have developed towards elections and voting. In fact, I have stressed this point that you have something like, if I'm forcing you to eat, okay, when you when you're hungry or when you're ill, if I'm forcing you for health medical support, it's not basically wrong. I was saying that voting is such a fundamental core aspect of democratic processes. That is, it's not forcing the individual to vote, but I'm saying if you have the vote and I don't want to exercise, voting doesn't fall into such kind of rights that you have. So you have to be very careful about that. And this is an interesting question that you have raised, Giovanni, like when you said immediate benefit. Voting is providing immediate benefit, and that is pragmatic, that is existentialist, that is how people tend to go for it. I believe that is how people also sell themselves, get corrupted easily. So that's, I don't think any kind of philosophy would say instant gratification should be weighed more than the larger benefit of the individual. Because when we are looking at the institutions and political democratic processes, it is not the instant gratification that stabilizes the society, because it's not just you. When you're ready to go for instant benefit, immediate benefit, it's not just you are also impacting it negatively on the whole society in terms of giving away your right to somebody, selling it. So that is how I believe that shows the corrupt nature that people were encouraging us to have. So that's an important point. It's not pragmatism. In fact, pragmatism will say you look for your longer benefit, long time benefit. And even existentialism would stress, utilitarianism will also say that you should look for the longer one, because utilitarianism basically looks for consequences, and consequences stress on that particular point. And Gillian's interesting point that she has mentioned is important for me, because she says, do you think that you always get best systems, only then I would vote for then only then I will exercise my vote? Are you going to say that? You will never find such kind of perfect systems. If you say that only if there are perfect parties I will go and vote, that's not going to be the reality at any point of time at all. That is where I would say philosophy says, what is your reality? Your reality is what is next to you. Okay, I'm not going for the idealism. I'm saying reality as it is next to you has to be accepted and responded.
Okay, Prof. Just want to jump in right there. I think Jeanette Calder also has a perspective on this, because she believes you don't have to vote to voice your opinion in a democracy. And she was responding to Gillian in the chat. Jeanette, is it possible for you to just expound on your belief and your thoughts on this?
Yes, certainly. I see the citizen as using the voting mechanism to employ 63
Sorry, could you
parliament.
start again? Could you start again, Jeanette? Your voice is a little bit low.
A little low? I'll turn up
Yes,
the mic.
better now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. I was saying that I see the citizen playing three roles. We own all public resources. We do, not this abstract thing called government. We, through a voting mechanism, we employ 63 parliamentarians.
Think we've lost Jeanette there.
Yeah, but I was reading her response here to Gillian, where she says voting is not the only kind of participation. Okay, I agree. I agree that there are different other ways of participating in the democratic processes. But as I am saying it again, like I would, do you say that breathing is only one of the ways of living, but breathing is fundamental, right? So voting is such a fundamental thing for democratic processes, like breathing for an individual. So that's the point that I'm stressing.
Roger Goodwill saying, I think in response to when Richard was speaking, if you spoil the ballot, sorry, do you think you should still voice your opinions publicly on public matters? And I see an interesting response to that from Dr. Farquharson, Joseph Farquharson. Joseph, for those of us who aren't able to see the chat, do you mind sharing that view publicly and expounding on it just a little bit for about 30 seconds, if you are able to speak?
Oh, it's almost as if you are asking me to vote in this election. Yeah, I would say, this is a point I've heard before, but if spoiling his ballot disqualifies him or any member from voicing an opinion afterwards, then why doesn't it disqualify you from paying taxes? And it doesn't, because voting is not the only way in which one participates in a society. And I think this is the point Prof. Bala was making, that we are reducing participation in the community to just one act which takes place every 5 years or so.
Your thoughts on that, Prof, because that's also a very interesting perspective, how we have set up democracy as if it's voting, and it's almost oriented around like it's the end all be all, the voting, which is I think what Dr. Farquharson is alluding to.
Yeah, I agree.
Ridiculing quite.
As I said before, there are other ways of participating in the democratic processes, and it is important for us to look at them as well. Even before, I would say, even before you vote, you have the right to be informed about everything, about every political party or the candidate who is contesting. Because you are not exercising that, they take you for granted. See, we as voters are taken for granted only because you are not exercising it, number one. Number two, you don't ask questions. That is how they think that it is okay to get away. Because see, the candidate is contesting from your own place, right? And you have a right to question them. And I believe now in most of the democracies, this process of questioning the contestants is increasingly coming up. And they were demanding people asking questions and encouraging them to respond to them so that next time, see, only if you ask questions this time, next time the person would try to be more responsible. So basically, there are other ways of participation that are important. 5 years, once in 5 years, voting is fundamental. As I said, it is like life breath to the whole democratic system. So you should never neglect this.
Let me just check if Gillian is back, and I wanted her perspective on this idea of mandatory voting, because I think Ika someone was raising the issue that Anand James actually mandatory voting in some other countries, and whether our thoughts on this locally here in Jamaica. Jeanette, your thoughts on that, given that you firmly believe that voting is not the only way that people can voice their opinions in a democracy?
If it's mandatory, I would have to agree that if you're compelling someone, I think you have gone outside the boundaries of principles of how a democracy works.
Should I respond to that? It is, I'm not saying that it is to be imposed from outside. It is like, as a citizen, it is your duty, right? It is an inner compulsion that you should find within yourself, rather than some political party or some government trying to impose it on you. So if you don't see it to be your responsibility, then you would say that, yeah, I would even say in some instances, voters are also escapists. That's where I say the crisis of democracy lies in voters rather than in leaders.
Gillian is raising her hand to ask a question. She has been typing some very provocative questions in the chat as well. We are literally less than a minute to go. So Gillian, the final question is coming to you. Your mic is muted if you're speaking, so could you unmute your mic? Go ahead. You're still muted, Gillian. You have to unmute.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted now. I would like to make an observation as well as ask a question. I think most of the people here who are talking about not voting have a dysfunctional concept of what their rights are in democracy. I happen to have lived in 2 dictatorships where the people would have died to have a vote. And I'm also mindful that it's not so long ago that our ancestors had no vote. You couldn't vote in Jamaica if you didn't own land and didn't belong to an elite group. Women fairly recently got the right to vote. And for me, this is a priceless right, which we cannot take for granted. The idea that you are going to wait for somebody else to create the perfect system for you to participate in is really not practical, nor is it something that will ever succeed. And I am disturbed that so many young people are not participating, and even that some young people think that it's the uneducated and perhaps the old. And I want to have a disclaimer here. I'm neither uneducated nor old. I'm very young in spirit. And I feel that this passion should be in our young people to want to shape their country, to want to be part of this democracy, because there are so many countries around the world that are dictatorships where their citizens have no rights, where they're suppressed, repressed, punished for simply wanting to participate. So we have this and we have taken it for granted, and perhaps we need to go into our history. And I want to ask the young people who are basically putting this view forward, who are they waiting on to create this perfect democracy? Who are they waiting on? My generation, the generations that have long gone before, who laid the foundation? Who is going to create the Jamaica that you will inherit and your children will inherit if you don't participate? That's my question.
Okay, and I will ask our young people to respond. I'm gonna make a quick concession here. We did start at 6:36. So let's say if you want to stay on, we will go up to 6:36, maybe 6:40. Well, 6:36 thereabouts. I have to respect people's time. It's an hour-long discussion. There's an implicit assumption, and I'm on neither side here, Ms. Rowland. And I see your hand, Dr. Farquharson. I am coming to you, and I will want you to respond. There's an implicit assumption in what you're saying, that young people know who are disillusioned by the system and uninterested in voting. Young people like Zante, who said they don't trust the system, and by not voting, she's showing her disgust with both political parties, because that's her view. But you're saying you're assuming that they're waiting for a perfect system, one, and two. Another assumption that they don't know about their history. And I'm putting it to you, a lot of young people I've spoken with, and I'm perhaps in my last year of fairly calling myself a young person now, they are very much educated about the past and they know about their past, but they're also choosing to stay away because for them, whoever wins come tomorrow, Tuesday morning, if whoever wins today, it won't make a difference in their day-to-day lives because the policies and the ideologies are not so much far apart again as they were back in the day. They're very much similar, and really and truly for them, not much will change. And that's a view that a lot of them posit. How do you respond to people who reason like that based on what you're saying? I just wanted a quick response from me before I go to Dr. Farkas next, and then I'd love Prof. Ball to comment on it quickly as well.
Are you asking me to respond?
Because I'm playing devil's advocate for them, because there was an assumption that they are unaware.
I am saying that there are different assumptions that I have made. I believe that some young people are unaware. I believe that some young people are complacent. I believe that some young people have retreated from the process. And I'm saying, who then are you waiting on to create this perfect democracy? If you don't have a choice, you don't have a voice. And when the person or the party that is not performing or that is not living up to their ideology does not, make the grade, who are you to complain if you have never participated?
Okay, quickly, Richard, Zante, and Perry, I want you all to respond, starting with Perry. I see Perry tweeting something in the chat. So go ahead, Perry. You've heard Miss Rowland criticizing all of you young people. Shame on you for not using your right to vote that your ancestors fought and died for in many instances. And I'm not trivializing this, by the way. I'm just being provocative.
All right. So again, good evening. Thank you for the discussion. Miss Rowland would have said a number of things. I smiled because, I believe that she is right to some extent, and I will agree with her to some extent. I believe young people are brilliant people. And just as though she is educated, I believe that young people do have the knowledge as to how important the democratic process is. However, if persons retreat from the process, there must be a reason why. Now, in the last local election, not even 30% turned out to vote. Now, it's not just young people who didn't turn out to vote, but the young, the old, the middle age was found to be in the apathy where voting is concerned. So it's not just young people, but then we all have a part to play. Over the years, we've seen corruption in our governments. We've seen where governments disregard the voice of young people. It seems as if politics overall has become more distant from the youth. So we cannot blame young people for the most part to retreat, the term was used, who avoids the process altogether. There is a part that all of us should play as it relates to having persons participate in a democratic process. Here at the University of the West Indies Mona campus, I would have the opportunity to speak with a lot of young people. I was on Smile Jamaica some time ago as we spoke about voting and if it counts. One of the things that I heard from young people is that they are not seeing the immediate or long-term benefits of voting. Now, my question is this, Mr. Giovanni. If we are not seeing the benefits of voting, can we blame a person for not voting? Whether it was a right, whether they fought for it, we appreciate it. But do you blame persons for not voting if they are not seeing the immediate or long-term effects of voting? That is my question.
Interesting stuff there, and I will ask Prof. Bala to respond. I do see Ika or Ika Bailey, forgive me if I'm pronouncing a name wrong, Mr. or Mrs. Bailey, or young people are expressing our views though through other avenues that are equally effective. This is Ika responding to the idea that young people aren't voting. She's saying they're expressing their views other ways. I guess social media as well. Raquel Rax Rhino saying that she agrees with Mrs. Rowland's point of view. Carla Gentle saying our education sector is at fault here. Ding, 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 ding. Major issue right there that we haven't properly discussed and doing enough, which is what the Department of Philosophy, Language, Linguistics, and Philosophy is doing. Sorry, I have to do the plug for them here, although I'm not being paid. But we are starting the discussion and having these very important discussions. Of course, we won't answer everything in this forum, but it is a start, and I'm encouraging other departments in your groups, in your leadership groups, or the young people on the panel here to do the same. Have these discussions and challenge each other. Ask the questions, why aren't you voting? Because I don't have a position on what Gillian or on what Mr. Perry is saying. Either way, the view should continue and we should discuss it, because really and truly, in the long and short of it is to make our country better. I see Nicole agreeing with me that the hour is not long enough. Dr. Farkas, I'm taking the last view from you. I did say 6:36. We're at 6:38. No, I'm ending at 6:40. I have to respect everyone's time, and I don't want the Zoom to kick us off. But I'll have you let you make your last comment or a question, and then I'll take final wrapping up comments from all our four panelists. Go ahead, Mr. Dr. Parkinson.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that you know, up to this year, I was a lifelong and very proud non-voter. And I'd still defend, you know, anybody's right, you know, not to vote if they so desire. I voted. It was not a very empowering experience for me. I did not feel as if I had done something that made a difference. But what I can see, having reflected on it, where about 38% of the population turned out to vote, it dawned on me that there are 62% of people out there who have said this thing is not working. Now, if there's 62% of us out there, it means that if that 62% decides to do something, we have the possibility to beat either of the two parties or even both of them combined. Which led me to then ask, can I reasonably continue to take the position I'm taking? So what then is the next step? Because the power is really in the hands of the 62% of the population saying that this system is not work. So I think the note is, having decided that, what is our next move?
What is our next move? We are now going to take final comments from all our panelists. Just want to quickly share some of the comments in our comment section here, though. Samuel raising another important issue, that some of those who do not intend to vote in Jamaica are also giving up on another duty, which is jury duty. You're not Jamaican, but you're merely repeating what you have heard. Thoughts? In short, Samuel, people are afraid. Jamaica is violent. People have gotten threats. They are very real and credible threats from persons, some of who are often on trial, and they use their subordinates to carry out dangerous things to people. Many instances about this have been written about, and people have very chilling stories. In short, to answer that question, Nicole was saying we were younger too, and the same issues exist now as it was then. I vote, and I'm still waiting to see how my vote makes a difference and affects my community positively. Very important, real. So here's someone who has voted who's saying, hey, may not really see the difference either. Roland Booth asking, what was the voter turnout in the last guild election? Can you answer that, President-elect Perry?
Yes, Mr. Dennis.
Yes, so what was the guild turnout in the last election? 10 seconds.
The turnout in the last guild elections was still low. Experts say it was better than last year. There was some excitement.
Do you have a percentage?
And we don't have an exact percentage. But it was higher than last year for sure. We're definitely sure of that.
So again, the guild elections, they're being a microcosm of the macrocosm that is Jamaica, where voter apathy is concerned. Nicole agreeing with me that an hour is not enough. Rowan saying the department is an excellent department to do courses, and he did a few there. And Kimaja is sharing some very important information about where you can get more information. I'm going to be wrapping up the discussion now, and I'll start with you as you just spoke, Mr. Perry. In a minute, your final thoughts on your final thoughts.
All right. So I heard the question, how do we move forward? From a youth perspective, I believe we must make politics and democracy attractive to young people. It's just the truth of it. Not everyone is so privileged to be brought up in a political home. I was not brought up in a political home. Therefore, I did not have any interest in politics. But over time, as I sought my own path, I saw where I got involved. But not every young person is willing to step out and just get involved like that. We must make it attractive. Secondly, I think we must look into other options where voting is concerned. I mentioned at a national level, I made some recommendations that it could be possible for us to implement online voting for even the diaspora, where persons from even overseas can participate in our election process. I believe in Panama and other places, they do have an online option where voting is concerned at the national level. So
for
that's
people
something
in the diaspora?
For people. So Jamaicans overseas, they can have
you're
an
saying in
option.
Panama, they have online options for people to vote in the diaspora.
Yes.
In Panama?
Yes.
A
So
whole
yes.
other can of worms right there. That's perhaps a topic for another discussion, because there's some
topic for another discussion.
strongly about that. To say, listen, if you
Yes.
don't live in the country, you can't come vote and tell you what to do. Thank you so much for your views, Mr. Perizante. Your final word.
Okay, so firstly, I want to say this was an excellent session, even though I was in and out because of UA's terrible Wi-Fi. From what I heard, I would like to say that in order for the voter apathy situation among young people, especially, to be, addressed, I believe that the disconnect between the politicians and the citizens of Jamaica should be fixed, because they seem to be disconnected from the everyday lives of citizens, and some of them are more focused on elitism and things like that. So I believe that politicians should have conversations with students, maybe come on campus, speak with them, so that students have the opportunity to ask them questions.
All right, and Richard.
Yes, thank you. This was a really good conversation. Professor, I thank you for helping me to see my right to exercise my right to vote in an ethical sort of way. So thank you for that. My views are definitely changing. However, I would love to see a more direct sort of democracy for Jamaica. It's not about uneducated and educated people and young and old, but we are all feeling a disconnect, as Zante said, with the politicians. We only see them every 4 or 5 years when they're coming out to campaign or giving you a bag of rice or something, when they want to pass down something to you. In terms of when bills are being amended or new laws being introduced, it comes across so boring in the media. I think the media has a great role to play in that as well. But then again, that speaks to the monopolizing of what I see in Jamaica. It's like it's controlled by one thing. I'd love to see that broken down. And that's our call to action here. Thank you.
Wow, and just before I go to Prof. Bala for the final word, I saw someone put, I think it was Roland Booth or someone else who was saying in the chat that the assumption about why young people aren't voting may be wrong. I wanted him to explain what the assumption was. That was a little unclear, but I saw that comment in the chat, and Gillian making a very important point. This is not just about young people and the old people, it is about the quality of our citizenry, and I couldn't agree more with that. And she's also saying apathy will lead to hopelessness and possible cop-out if we refuse to exercise our rights to act. Prof. Bala, the final word to you before I wrap up.
Yeah, thank you. It's really a wonderful discussion that we had. But now my fundamental basic question is, how is it philosophical point of view, right? We had a political discussion. So how do we call it philosophical point of view? That's where I'm trying to wrap up everything. See, for me, philosophy is a kind of reflective discipline. It encourages each one of us to reflect on our own present state so that we can move forward, because our friend Dr. Joseph has asked how to move forward, right? So that's the best question to begin, in fact, for ourselves. My fundamental thing in order to encourage this reflectivity that I would like to pose is, what is your political reality in your mind? If you haven't thought about what is my political reality of Jamaica in my mind, please do think about it. Once you start thinking about it, you would find, okay, once you have some political reality in your mind, then you would start feeling your own responsibility towards the present state of affairs and also your possible participation for the future of Jamaica. Right? So that is how the basic fundamental thing is, ask this question: what is my political reality of Jamaica? Am I okay with the 60% not voting and saying that, oh, all of them are wrong, so I don't want to participate at all in it? Or this is where I was basically, if you remember, I was asking this fundamental question: do you think that inaction is better than action? I would leave it to the wisdom of all of you. Think about it, because action can make a change. Inaction can never make a change. So that is where it is important to participate and then change. If you opt to not to participate and keep blame, then where are you going? What are you expecting to happen? Okay, that's where I say, are you ready to change? If you are not ready to change, can you expect change in the society or in the political system? If you are not ready to change, but you want others to change and system to change, I would say, I'm sorry. So think about it. This is where I would say, what is your political reality that you have, and what kind of knowledge of the political reality? I would say, with regard to the students, they are ready to participate and vote in guild elections, which means they are not against the democratic processes. But why is this the so-called apathy that we are talking about with regard to the general elections? They want to be a part of it, but they don't want to be a part of the other larger one. In fact, this is where I would say even the education is really working. It's working for them to understand the political processes and democratic processes, but they are not ready to extend it beyond their own limited domain, which is a problematic thing. I would say, seriously think about it, reflect on it. That's what philosophy tries to tell us. Philosophy's main concern is to make people reflect and think and question. So I believe that's where I should stop myself. And I'm sure this discussion has done its job by making all of us reflect and think and question. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Prof. Bala. Very insightful. Many of our persons who joined on commending your views and are appreciative of it, and they are expressing it in the chat. Raquel saying you are wise, Nicole saying truth, Jeanette saying good point. Prof, we have to be the change you want to see, and stop waiting on another. On that point that you made about the inaction, there's a quote from Haile Selassie that says, throughout history, it has been the inaction of those who could have acted that has allowed evil to triumph. And I think that's a somber and good note on which to end. I also saw Shamari in the chat agreeing with the point that I think Zante was making, that there is a disconnect between the politicians and some categories of voters, namely young people, that she was referring to. And I guess going forward, more of that needs to happen. Certainly more discussions like these need to happen. This has been a truly enriching discussion. I've enjoyed it thoroughly from the word go. I can't believe we're almost at an hour and a half already. Thank you all for staying with us. We stayed above 30, or 35 thereabouts throughout. We went up as high as 38 at one point in terms of persons who are tuned in. So it has truly definitely been an engaging discussion. So people want to talk politics, and we want to discuss how we can fix our future and our country. And I think as well, this is a part of our democracy, which is important as well, although, and people aren't necessarily voting here. But it has been good. I want to thank you all so much. If you want to get in touch with the Department of Language, Linguistics and Philosophy, the information is in the chat. I'll quickly just share the email that has been shared by Kimaja Connell, dllp@uwimona.edu.jm. That's dllp@uwimona.edu.jm. And the philosophy section coordinator is Dr. Rotimi Omosulu. And the email is firstname.lastname@uwimona.edu.jm. And of course, you can reach out to Kimaja Connell at kimaja.connell@uwimona.edu.jm for further discussion. Thank you all so much for this discussion. It was very enriching, and I'm certainly looking forward to the next installment of the Philosopher's Point of View. Take care and good evening.
Evening, good evening. Thank
Namaste.
you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thanks.
Thank you.